The morning sun was just beginning to warm the streets when a little girl came running down the sidewalk, her small feet pounding against the pavement. She wore a pink backpack that bounced behind her with every step, and tears streamed down her face. Her eyes were red, her breath uneven, and she looked like she had seen something terrifying. People walking their dogs or getting into their cars turned to watch her as she ran past them. Something about the way she moved, fast, scared, desperate, made them stop what they were doing and stare. She didn't look back. She didn't slow down. All she did was run toward the bus stop at the end of the street, where the big yellow school bus had just pulled up. The doors were open, and the driver stood near the steps waiting for kids to climb aboard. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a calm voice, someone who had been driving this route for years. He knew most of the kids by name. He always greeted them with a smile and made sure they were safe before pulling away from the stop. But today, something was different. As he looked up, he saw the little girl sprinting toward him, crying loudly. His smile faded. He stepped forward, holding onto the railing of the bus as if bracing himself for whatever was coming. Other students on the bus noticed too. Some leaned out the windows, curious. Others whispered to each other, wondering why she was so upset. When she reached the bottom of the stairs, she looked up at him with wide, frightened eyes. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she tried to catch her breath. Then, in a shaky voice filled with fear, she said 4 words that made the color drain from his face. "He's in my house." Those words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. No one spoke. Even the wind seemed to pause for a moment. The bus driver stared at her, trying to understand what she meant. His mind raced through possibilities. Was it someone dangerous? Did she mean an intruder? A stranger? He asked her slowly, gently, "Who's in your house?" But she couldn't answer clearly. She only shook her head, tears spilling again as she struggled to speak. "He's there," she managed to say between sobs. "I saw him." The other children on the bus started to quiet down. Some sat up straighter in their seats. One boy, near the window, called out, "What's going on?" But no one answered. The bus driver put a hand on the little girl's shoulder and told her to take deep breaths. "It's okay now," he said softly. "You're safe here. Just tell me what happened." She sniffled hard, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her jacket. Then she explained, in broken sentences and pauses, how she had woken up early that morning because she heard a noise downstairs. At first, she thought it was her parents maybe making breakfast or packing things for work, but when she peeked out of her bedroom door, she realized the sound wasn't normal. It was more like something falling over, or footsteps moving around the living room. She had crept quietly to the top of the stairs and looked down. That's when she saw him. A man standing in the middle of the living room looking around like he was searching for something. He wasn't wearing a mask. He didn't seem worried about being seen. When he turned his head slightly, he caught sight of her watching from above, and then instead of panicking or hiding, he smiled. A slow, strange smile that made her stomach twist. He raised a finger to his lips, signaling for her to be quiet, and then turned back to whatever he was doing. That's when she ran. She didn't wait to see more. She grabbed her backpack, slipped on her shoes, and bolted out the front door without even locking it behind her. She ran all the way to the bus stop, not stopping once, not daring to look back. The bus driver listened, carefully, his face growing more serious with every word. He glanced at the other kids on the bus, then at his phone. He needed to call someone, police maybe, or the school office. But he also needed to keep the little girl calm. He patted the seat beside him and helped her onto the bus. She sat down near the front, still trembling. He handed her a bottle of water from under his seat and told her everything would be okay. Outside, people had gathered near the bus, curious about what was happening. A neighbor who had seen the girl running stopped to ask if everything was all right. The driver explained briefly, saying the girl thought someone might be inside her home. He asked if anyone could stay with her while he made a few calls. A woman nearby nodded and climbed onto the bus, sitting beside the girl and wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Meanwhile, the bus driver picked up his phone and dialed 911. He gave the operator the address of the girl's house and explained what she had told him. The dispatcher asked if anyone else was supposed to be home, and the driver said no. Then he added, "She says the man saw her. He smiled at her." There was a long pause on the line before the operator said, "We'll send officers right away." As they waited for the police to arrive, the bus driver kept talking to the girl, asking gentle questions to try and get more details. What did the man look like? How old was he? What was he wearing? But she couldn't remember much. She only kept repeating, "He smiled. He saw me." The words sent chills through the bus. Even the adults listening felt uneasy. Minutes ticked by slowly. The sky remained clear, the sun shining brightly, but the mood on the bus was dark. Kids whispered nervously, glancing out the windows. Some stared at the road behind them, almost expecting someone to come running after the girl. The woman sitting next to her held her hand tightly, trying to offer comfort. Finally, flashing lights appeared in the distance. 2 police cars arrived, pulling up behind the bus. Officers got out, their hands resting near their belts as they approached. They spoke first to the bus driver, then crouched down to talk to the girl. She repeated the same story again, her voice shaking but her words clear. The officers exchanged looks, then radioed for backup. One officer stood up and said, "We're going to go check the house. We need you to stay here until we know it's safe." The bus driver nodded. The woman beside the girl hugged her tighter. Everyone watched as the police cars drove off, tires rolling fast down the street. Inside the bus, silence settled once again. No one laughed. No one played games on their phones. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Who was that man? Why was he in the girl's house? And most importantly, why did he smile at her? The police cars sped away from the bus stop, their sirens silent but their flashing lights cutting through the morning calm. The road behind them emptied quickly as people stepped back, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes and hushed voices. Inside the school bus, the air felt thick, like something heavy had settled over everyone. No one spoke. Even the youngest kids, usually full of energy and laughter at this time of day, sat quietly in their seats, eyes darting between the windows and the little girl who had caused all the worry. She sat near the front, her small hands wrapped tightly around the water bottle the bus driver had given her. Her breathing was still uneven, her chest rising and falling fast. She kept looking toward the back of the bus, as if expecting someone to come walking in through the doors. The woman beside her whispered soft words of comfort, telling her she was safe now, that the police were on their way. But the girl didn't seem to hear. Her mind was still back at home, in the hallway above the living room, where a man had looked up and smiled at her like he knew exactly what she would do next. Back at the house, the officers pulled up slowly, parking just far enough away not to draw attention. They moved carefully, checking the street for anything unusual before stepping onto the sidewalk. The front door was open a crack, just enough for a breeze to push it slightly back and forth. One officer signaled to another, raising his hand in a silent gesture. They approached with guns drawn but held low, ready for anything. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet. There was no sound of movement, no sign of life. The living room was a mess. A lamp lay broken on the floor, its shade crushed beneath the weight of a fallen chair. Papers were scattered across the carpet, some crumpled, others torn. The coffee table had been pushed aside, revealing a patch of bare wooden floor that hadn't seen sunlight in years. It looked like someone had been searching for something in a hurry. The officers split up, moving room by room with careful steps. They checked the kitchen first, then the bedrooms upstairs. Every drawer was open, every closet door left ajar. Whoever had been here had gone through everything, leaving chaos in their wake. But there was no sign of the man the girl had described. No fingerprints, no footprints, nothing to suggest how he had gotten in or how he had left so quickly. In the master bedroom, one officer found something strange on the nightstand, a small photo frame turned face down. When he picked it up and flipped it over, he saw a family picture. The little girl, her parents, and a dog they used to have before it passed away last year. The glass was cracked right down the middle, splitting the image in two. He exchanged A look with his partner, then placed the frame carefully into an evidence bag. Downstairs in the kitchen, another officer noticed something written on the table. It wasn't carved or printed. It was scrawled in messy handwriting with a marker, like whoever wrote it had been in a rush. The message was short and chilling. "She knows too much." The officer read it again, then called the others over. They stood around the table, staring at the words, trying to make sense of them. Who was she? The little girl? And what did she know? Was this a warning, a threat, or something else entirely? Back at the bus, time seemed to stretch endlessly. The children had grown restless, whispering among themselves about what might be happening at the girl's house. Some thought it was just a misunderstanding, maybe someone fixing a pipe or delivering something early in the morning. Others weren't so sure. The boy near the window kept peeking out, hoping to see the police return. The girl sat silently, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, waiting for news that never came quickly enough. The bus driver paced near the front, occasionally glancing at his phone to check for messages. He had already sent a text to the school office explaining the situation, and they had responded saying they would inform the parents. Now, all he could do was wait. He tried to keep the mood light by cracking a joke or two, but his voice lacked its usual warmth. He was worried, not just about the girl, but about what this meant for the neighborhood. If a stranger had been inside a child's home smiling at her like nothing was wrong, then what else was possible? Finally, after nearly 40 minutes, the police returned. Their faces were unreadable as they stepped off their cars and walked toward the bus. The driver opened the doors and let them in. One officer went straight to the girl while the other spoke to the woman beside her. The officer crouched down, making himself level with the child. "We went to your house," he said gently. "We looked everywhere, but we didn't find anyone. Do you remember anything else about the man?" The girl shook her head slowly, her lips pressed together. She wanted to help, but her memory was blurry, like a dream slipping away upon waking. The officer nodded and gave her a reassuring smile. "That's okay. You did the right thing by running here. We're going to keep looking for him." Then he stood up and walked toward the bus driver. "We'll need to take a formal statement later," he said. "But for now, I think it's best if she goes home with someone." The bus driver agreed. He asked the woman beside the girl if she could stay with her until her parents arrived. She nodded without hesitation. Meanwhile, the officer radioed something into his handheld device requesting more support and possibly setting up a search in the surrounding area. As the police prepared to leave, the tension on the bus began to ease slightly. Kids started talking again, though their voices were still hushed. Some asked questions, wondering if the man would ever be caught. Others simply stared out the windows, thinking about how close danger had come to their lives. Outside, the sun continued to rise higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the pavement. The world seemed normal again, but for those who had witnessed the little girl's fear, nothing felt quite the same. Something had happened that morning, something real, something terrifying, and it had changed the way they saw the world around them. The bus driver took a deep breath and looked at the girl one more time before closing the doors. He gave a nod to the officer outside, then turned the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life, signaling the start of the school route. But today no one was eager to get to class. Today they were all thinking about 4 simple words spoken in fear. "He's in my house." And somewhere, hidden in the quiet corners of town, someone was thinking about those words too. The school day started late for most children, but for the little girl and the bus driver, it never truly began. Word had spread quickly through the town. Parents were calling each other, asking questions they couldn't answer. Teachers whispered in hallways, trying to make sense of what had happened. The local news picked up the story within the hour, broadcasting short updates between weather reports and traffic alerts. But for those who had seen the girl running toward the bus with tears on her face, the fear hadn't faded. Back at the house, police officers moved carefully through every room, collecting evidence and taking pictures. They dusted doorknobs for fingerprints, checked windows to see if any had been forced open, and looked under furniture for anything out of place. Nothing seemed to be missing. No electronics, no jewelry, not even cash from drawers. It was as if the man hadn't come to steal but to search. In the kitchen, a detective studied the message written on the table. He read it over and over again. She knows too much. His brow furrowed. Who was she, the little girl? If so, what? Did she know? And why would someone break into their home just to leave a warning? He turned to his partner, a younger officer who had just finished speaking with a neighbor. Did you get anything from the people nearby? He asked. The young officer shook his head. No one saw anything unusual this morning. One lady said she heard footsteps around 5:30, but she thought it was the mailman. No one reported hearing voices or seeing strangers. The detective nodded slowly. So we've got an intruder who came in quietly, left without being seen and didn't take anything, just searched the house and left a note. He paused, looking back at the words on the table. This wasn't a random break-in. This was targeted. Outside, reporters gathered near the yellow tape blocking off the front yard. A news van had arrived, its camera crew setting up quickly while a reporter adjusted her earpiece and practiced lines for the live broadcast. Neighbors stood behind their fences, watching everything unfold like a scene from a movie. But this was real life, and no one knew how it would end. Back on the school bus, the atmosphere remained tense. The woman who had stayed with the girl sat beside her, holding her hand tightly. She tried to talk about normal things, what kind of snacks she liked, what games she played at recess, but the girl barely responded. Her eyes were distant, her thoughts locked somewhere else. The bus driver kept glancing at the rearview mirror, checking if the police had returned. When they didn't appear, he turned his attention to the road ahead. The route felt longer than usual today. Every stop brought more anxious parents waiting with worried expressions. Some rushed forward as soon as the doors opened, asking if their child had heard anything about the incident. Others simply waved and sent their kids on board without a word, eager to get back inside where they felt safe. At the school, teachers met students with extra hugs and gentle smiles, hoping to calm the unease that had settled over the building. In one classroom, a boy whispered to his friend, "My mom said someone broke into Emily's house this morning." His friend's eyes widened. "Who's Emily?" he asked. The first boy shrugged. "I don't know, but my mom said she ran crying to the bus driver and told him there was a man inside. By lunchtime, rumors had grown. Some kids said the man had been wearing a mask. Others claimed he had chased the girl down the street. A few even said she had seen a ghost. But none of them knew the truth, and the adults weren't telling. Meanwhile, the girl sat in the principal's office, wrapped in a blanket provided by the school counselor. Her parents had been called and were on their way, but until they arrived, she stayed quiet, sipping warm juice and staring at the floor. The counselor asked soft questions, trying to help her feel safe, but she answered in short sentences, her voice barely above a whisper. The bus driver waited nearby, standing by the window with his hands in his pockets. He watched cars pull into the parking lot, hoping to spot the girl's parents. He had seen a lot during his years driving the route. Kids falling asleep on long rides, arguments between siblings, even a few medical emergencies. But nothing had ever shaken him like this. When the girl's parents finally arrived, they rushed into the office, their faces pale with worry. They hugged their daughter tightly, asking if she was okay, if anyone had hurt her. She shook her head no, but didn't say much else. The counselor explained what had happened, and the parents listened carefully, nodding along before thanking everyone for helping. Later that evening, the family returned home. Police had cleaned up the mess left behind, but the house still felt different. The broken lamp was gone, the chair was upright, and the papers had been gathered, but something about the air made them uneasy. The parents walked through every room, making sure all the doors were locked and the windows were secure. They gave their daughter a warm bath, tucked her into bed early, and sat beside her until she fell asleep. But even after she closed her eyes, her mother stayed in the room, sitting in a chair by the door. She held a phone in her hand, ready to call the police again if needed. Her father stood outside in the hallway, pacing slowly, unable to shake the feeling that someone had been watching their home. Across town, the bus driver sat alone in his living room, replaying the morning in his mind. He had worked this route for nearly 15 years, and he had always believed his job was simple: get the kids to school safely, make sure they behaved, and keep an eye out for trouble. But today had changed everything. He picked up his coffee mug and took a slow sip, staring at the television without really watching it. He thought about the look on the girl's face when she said those 4 words. He thought about the silence on the bus afterward. He thought about the message on the kitchen table, and he wondered if whoever had been in that house was still out there, waiting for another chance to return. The town didn't sleep that night. Even though the sun had set and most homes were quiet, something unseen moved through the streets like a whisper no one could ignore. The little girl's story had spread far beyond her neighborhood. It was on every parent's lips, in every dinner conversation, and behind every closed door where grown-ups tried to explain the unexplainable to their children. At the police station, officers worked late into the night, going over every detail of what had happened. They replayed security footage from nearby houses, checked for any unusual activity near the girl's street, and reviewed past reports of strange behavior or suspicious figures seen walking around the area. But there was nothing clear, nothing solid, just a feeling, a growing sense of unease that wouldn't go away. Detectives sat around a large table covered in papers, photos, and notes. One officer tapped his pen against the message found on the kitchen table. "She knows too much." He looked up at his partner and said, "We need to find out what she might know. Something about this house, this family. Something important enough for someone to break in." His partner nodded. "We'll talk to the parents tomorrow. Maybe they've noticed anything unusual lately. Maybe someone's been watching them." Outside, the city lights flickered against the dark sky, but inside the station, the mood remained heavy. Phones rang constantly as people called in tips, some useful, many not. A man claimed he saw a shadowy figure walking near the woods last week. Another woman said she heard whispers outside her window 2 nights ago. None of it led anywhere, but each call made the fear grow stronger. Back at the girl's house, the lights stayed on long after bedtime. Her parents sat in the living room, speaking in low voices while keeping an eye on the front door. Every creak of the floorboards made them jump. Every passing car sent a wave of tension through their bodies. They had locked every window, double-checked every door, and even placed chairs under the handles just in case. The little girl lay in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. She had changed into her favorite pajamas, the ones with dancing bears, but they didn't make her feel safe tonight. She kept thinking about the man in her house, the way he had looked up at her, the way he had smiled. That smile haunted her, more than the broken lamp or the scattered papers. It wasn't a mean smile. It wasn't angry. It was calm, knowing, like he had expected her to see him. Downstairs, her mother paced back and forth, holding a phone tightly in her hand. She wanted to call relatives to send her daughter somewhere else until everything settled down, but her husband shook his head. "We can't run," he whispered. "We have to face this. We have to find out why this happened." The next morning, the town woke up to news headlines filled with questions and very few answers. The local paper ran a short article titled, "Mysterious Break-in Leaves Family Shaken." Online forums buzzed with theories, some wild, some serious. Some people believed it was a prank gone wrong. Others thought it was connected to something bigger, something hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. At school, teachers did their best to keep things normal. Children played during recess, ate lunch in the cafeteria, and lined up for class like always. But beneath the surface, the event lingered in their minds. The bus driver arrived early, checking the route twice, before letting students climb aboard. He watched every stop carefully, scanning faces, looking for anything out of place. Inside the classroom, the little girl sat quietly, drawing pictures with crayons. Her teacher gave her extra attention, making sure she felt comfortable, but the girl barely spoke. When asked how she was doing, she simply nodded and said, "Okay." No one pushed her further. During lunch, a group of kids huddled together, whispering about what had happened. One boy said, "I bet it was a ghost. My cousin says ghosts leave messages sometimes." Another girl rolled her eyes. Ghosts don't break into houses. It was probably a robber who got scared when she saw him. But none of them knew the truth, and neither did the detective still working the case. Later that day, police returned to the house to speak with the parents again. This time they brought a sketch artist, hoping the girl might remember more details about the man. They sat in the living room, asking gentle questions. Did he have any scars? Was his hair short or long? What color were his eyes? The girl thought, hard, trying to bring the memory forward. She remembered his smile, the way his eyes had met hers. But the rest was blurry, like a dream slipping away. Finally, she said softly, "He looked familiar." The word sent a chill through the room. Her parents exchanged worried looks. "Familiar?" her father asked. "Like someone you've seen before?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Maybe, on TV?" That answer sent the detectives back to the station with new urgency. They began reviewing missing persons cases, criminal records, and old news reports. They searched for anyone recently released from prison, anyone with a history of breaking into homes, anyone who might have lived in the town years ago. Meanwhile, the girl's parents decided to install new locks, security cameras, and motion sensor lights around the house. They hired a neighbor to watch the property while they slept, and they kept the doors locked at all times. But no matter how many precautions they took, the fear never fully left them. As days turned into weeks, the town slowly returned to normal. People stopped talking about the incident as much. Life went on. Kids forgot the rumors. Teachers stopped checking the windows during class. But for the girl, the bus driver, and the detectives still searching for answers, the event remained, fresh in their minds. And somewhere hidden in the shadows of the town, someone else remembered too. Someone who had stood in a living room, smiled at a child, and left behind 4 simple words written in messy handwriting. "She knows too much." Those words weren't just a warning. They were a promise that whoever had been there hadn't forgotten. And maybe, just maybe, they were waiting for the right moment to return. Weeks passed and the town tried to forget. Life moved forward like a river that had briefly been disturbed but now smoothed itself out again. The little girl returned to school, the bus driver continued his route, and the police still searched for answers in quiet corners of their station. But even as days turned into months, something lingered beneath the surface, something unseen, something waiting. The detectives hadn't stopped working on the case. They reviewed old files, chased down leads, and interviewed anyone who might have known something. A man had entered that house. He hadn't taken anything. He hadn't hurt anyone. But he had left behind a message that no one could ignore. "She knows too much." That phrase haunted every officer who read it. What did she know? Why had he smiled at her? And most importantly, who was he? Back at the girl's house, life had changed. Her parents no longer left doors unlocked. Lights stayed on late into the night. They installed cameras around the property, checked windows before bed, and never let her walk alone to the bus stop. She seemed fine on the outside, but those closest to her noticed small changes. She hesitated before entering rooms. She woke up in the middle of the night convinced someone was watching, and sometimes when she thought no one was looking, she stared at the front door like she expected it to open on its own. At school, teachers kept an extra eye on her. She didn't talk much anymore. She played quietly during recess, often sitting under a tree instead of running with the other kids. Some students whispered about what had happened, but most avoided bringing it up. It was easier not to ask questions they couldn't answer. The bus driver, however, never forgot. Every morning he watched the streets more carefully. He scanned faces at each stop, checked mirrors twice before pulling away from the curb. He told himself it was just being cautious, but deep down, he knew the truth. He was afraid. One afternoon, while driving the usual route, he saw something strange. Near the edge of town, where the road curved past an empty field, a man stood beside a broken-down car. He wore a dark jacket, had short hair, and looked directly at the bus as it passed. Something about him felt familiar. The way he stood, the way he watched. The bus driver slowed slightly, trying to get a better look, but by the time he reached the next stop, the man was gone. He told no one about it at first. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe he was imagining things. But later that night, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at a photo of the girl he had printed from the school newsletter. Then he picked up his phone and dialed the police station. "I think I saw him," he said when the detective answered. Back at the station, officers listened carefully. They asked questions. Did he remember any details? Could he describe the man? Was there any chance it was someone else? The bus driver wasn't sure. But he remembered the feeling. The same cold shiver that had run through him the day the little girl ran toward his bus, crying 4 words that changed everything. The next morning, police arrived early at the girl's house. They spoke to her parents, then took another look at the security footage from the cameras installed around the property. Nothing unusual showed up, just neighbors walking dogs, mailmen delivering packages, kids riding bikes. But near the end of the video, something caught their attention. A man walked past the house late at night. He wore a hoodie, keeping his face mostly hidden, but he paused outside the gate and looked directly at the camera. For a few seconds, he just stood there. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness. The detectives zoomed in, tried to enhance the image, but the quality wasn't good enough. Still, the message was clear. Someone had been watching. They showed the footage to the girl. She sat at the kitchen table holding a cup of warm juice, listening carefully as they explained what they had found. When they asked if the man looked like the one she had seen, she hesitated. Then slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "It's him." Her parents gasped. One of the officers placed a hand on her shoulder, speaking gently. "Do you remember anything else about him?" he asked. She thought for a moment, then said, "He smelled like smoke." The room fell silent. Smoke. Not cigarette smoke. Something different, something stronger, like firewood or burning wood chips. The detectives exchanged looks. That detail could help them. If the man worked somewhere near fireplaces, chimneys, or maybe even construction, they might be able to narrow down suspects. Later that day, they went back to the station and started searching local businesses. They looked for anyone with a history of odd behavior, anyone who had lived in the area years ago, anyone who might have known the family without them realizing it. Then, something unexpected came up. An old news article from nearly 10 years ago. A fire had destroyed a house not far from where the girl lived. No one had been hurt, but the owner, a man named Thomas Reed, had vanished afterward. His name appeared in the report because he had filed an insurance claim shortly before the fire. There were rumors he had said it himself, but nothing was ever proven. Thomas Reed. The name sounded familiar to one of the older officers. He pulled up a photo from a city records database. The man in the picture had short hair, sharp eyes, and a thin smile. When they showed it to the girl, she froze. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught in her throat. And then she whispered, barely, loud enough for anyone to hear, "That's him." The room filled with tension. Phones rang. Officers began calling local hospitals, checking missing persons reports, reaching out to neighboring towns. Thomas Reed had disappeared after the fire, but now it seemed he had returned. But why? Why now? And why had he gone into that house? As night fell, the town once again felt uneasy. Parents double-checked locks. Children stayed inside. The bus driver sat alone in his home, staring at the window, wondering if the man was out there, watching. Somewhere in the shadows, Thomas Reed waited, and the girl who had seen him smiled, knew he wasn't finished yet. The town was quiet again, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. The name Thomas Reed spread quickly through the streets like a cold wind, whispered in homes, at school gates, and inside stores where people glanced over their shoulders before speaking. Back at the police station, detectives worked non-stop. They dug into Thomas Reed's past, trying to find any clue about why he had returned or what he wanted from the girl's house. The fire 10 years ago was still unsolved, and now it seemed like more than just a coincidence. Had he been watching the family ever since? Had he been waiting? At the girl's home, her parents were on high alert. They didn't let her out of their sight. Her father stayed up all night sitting near the window with a flashlight and a phone ready to call the police. Her mother cooked meals she couldn't eat, paced the kitchen, and kept checking the locks every few minutes. They had done everything they could to keep their daughter safe, but nothing made them feel truly secure. The bus driver also couldn't rest. He replayed the moment the little girl ran toward him in his mind over and over. He remembered how pale he had gone when she said those 4 words. He remembered the silence on the bus. And now, knowing that, the man who had broken into her house might have once set a fire and disappeared without a trace, he felt like he was living inside a nightmare. The next morning, the town woke to news that Thomas Reed had been spotted walking near an old abandoned warehouse outside the city limits. A construction worker had seen him early that morning, standing alone near the fence line, looking like he was waiting for someone. When the worker approached, Reed turned and walked away, disappearing into the woods. Detectives rushed to the location, searching the area carefully. They found footprints in the dirt, cigarette butts, and signs that someone had been living there for days. Inside the warehouse, they discovered a small camp setup, blankets, a backpack, and a notebook filled with strange writing. Some pages had maps drawn in shaky lines. Others had names written repeatedly. Emily, Emily, Emily. The girl's name. They took everything as evidence and brought it back to the station. The notebook became the focus of their investigation. Pages upon pages of notes, some about the fire from 10 years ago, others describing the girl's house in detail. There were even sketches of the street, the bus stop, and the school. It was clear now. Thomas Reed hadn't just broken into the house by chance. He had been planning it, watching, waiting. At the school, teachers were given instructions to be extra careful. Parents were asked to pick up their children in person until further notice. The principal made sure all doors remained locked during the day. Even the bus driver double-checked every student who boarded, making sure no strangers tried to get on. But the real fear came late one evening when the girl's parents received a letter in the mail. There was no return address, no stamp. Just a white envelope slipped through the mail slot with their daughter's name written in messy handwriting on the front. Inside was a single sentence. "She knows too much, but I know more." Her mother screamed when she read it. Her father called the police immediately. Officers arrived within minutes, taking the letter as evidence. They increased patrols around the neighborhood, set up checkpoints near the woods, and placed undercover officers near the school. But despite all the effort, Thomas Reed had vanished again. Days passed, then weeks. There was no sign of him anywhere. No sightings, no messages, no clues. It was like he had disappeared into thin air once more. The town slowly began to relax. People stopped locking their doors twice before bed. Children played outside again. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after something like this. But for the girl, things would never be the same. She still had nightmares. She still looked over her shoulder sometimes when walking down the hall at school. She still stared at the front door at night, wondering if someone was out there. The bus driver watched her closely whenever she climbed onto the bus. He gave her a warm smile each morning, letting her know she was safe now. But he knew better than to think danger was gone forever. One afternoon, as the school year neared its end, the girl handed the bus driver a drawing she had made in art class. It showed a yellow school bus, a little girl running toward it, and a dark figure standing behind her. Above the figure's head in red crayon were the words, "He's still here." The bus driver swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "Thanks," he said gently. "You're really good at drawing." She nodded but didn't say anything else. She just sat down near the front of the bus and looked out the window. As he drove, he glanced at the rearview mirror often, scanning the road behind them. He told himself it was just habit now. But deep down, he knew better. Thomas Reed had left behind more than just a message. He had left behind a warning. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, He was still watching, still waiting, still smiling.